Hey there, fellow Pan-Africanists and supporters of the Sahel Confederation. Buckle up, because we've got some shocking news that's going to make your head spin. Denmark, yes, that small Scandinavian country, has just dropped a bombshell on Burkina Faso and Mali. They're closing their embassies. Can you believe it? Now I know what you're thinking. So what? It's just another Western country pulling out. But hold on, because the reasons behind this move are going to blow your mind. Let's dive in, shall we? First off, let's address the elephant in the room. Why is Denmark, of all countries, making such a drastic move? Well, they're claiming it's part of their new Africa strategy. But let's be real here. Is this really about strategy, or is it something else entirely? Here's where it gets interesting. Denmark says they're closing these embassies because military coups have severely limited the scope for action in the Sahel region. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a fancy way of saying, we can't control things anymore, so we're taking our ball and going home. What do you think? Is Denmark just throwing a diplomatic tantrum? But here's the kicker. While they're closing shop in Burkina Faso and Mali, they're opening new embassies in Senegal, Tunisia, and Rwanda. Talk about playing favorites. It's like they're saying, we don't like your new leadership, so we're going to be friends with your neighbors instead. How petty is that? Now let's take a moment to appreciate the irony here. While Western countries like Denmark are packing up and leaving, who's sticking around? That's right, China and Russia. These countries have been supporting African nations through thick and thin, even during the liberation struggles when many Western nations turned a blind eye. Remember how China and Russia supported independence movements across Africa? While Western powers were busy trying to maintain their colonial grip, these countries were providing arms, training, and diplomatic support to freedom fighters. And now, when the going gets tough, they're still here, standing shoulder to shoulder with African nations. Take Wagner Group, for example. While Western countries cry foul over their presence, many Africans see them as a welcome alternative to Western military assistance that often comes with strings attached. Is it any wonder that countries like Mali and Burkina Faso are turning to Russia for support? Now let's talk about France for a second. Notice how they're fighting tooth and nail to keep their embassies open in the alliance of Sahel states, AES countries. While Denmark is walking away, France is holding on tightly to its embassies in Burkina Faso and other AES countries. But why? If Western nations are so concerned about the political situation in the Sahel, shouldn't they all be leaving? Well, the answer likely lies in France's deep-rooted interest in African resources. France has long been accused of maintaining neo-colonial ties to its former colonies in West Africa, ensuring that their economies remain dependent on France. This is why France is unwilling to sever diplomatic ties, even in the face of rising anti-French sentiment in countries like Burkina Faso and Mali. The truth is, France stands to lose much more than Denmark, particularly when it comes to resource exploitation in these regions. And let's not forget, France has been embroiled in controversial military interventions, claiming to fight terrorism, but also securing its own economic interests in the process. Is France really there for diplomacy, or is it something more? Doesn't this support what many Africans have been saying all along? That France's interest in the region goes far beyond mere diplomacy? It's no secret that France has a long history of resource exploitation in its former colonies. So, when they insist on maintaining a presence while others leave, it raises some serious questions. Are they really there for diplomatic reasons, or is it about maintaining their grip on the region's resources? Here's another thing that'll make your blood boil. Despite all the chaos in Ukraine, these Western countries still maintain embassies there. So why the double standard when it comes to Africa? Is it because they see European conflicts as more civilized or worthy of diplomatic efforts? The hypocrisy is astounding. But let's flip the script for a second. Are the AES nations really going to lose anything from Denmark's departure? I mean, sure, it's one less Western voice in the diplomatic chorus. But is that really a bad thing? Maybe it's time for African nations to forge their own path, without constantly looking over their shoulder for Western approval. And let's not forget, Embassy closures don't necessarily mean an end to all relations. Other countries can still represent Denmark's interests if needed. So is this move more symbolic than practical? Is Denmark trying to send a message, and if so, to whom? Here's a question for you. Does this embassy closure mean an end to Danish humanitarian aid? Because if it does, that would be a low blow. Using aid as a political tool is a classic neo-colonial tactic. But if the aid continues, then what's the point of closing the embassy in the first place? Let's break down what an embassy closure really means. It's not just about diplomats packing their bags. It's about severing a direct line of communication, reducing cultural exchanges, and potentially complicating things for citizens of both countries. But in this age of digital diplomacy, how much does a physical embassy really matter? Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about Denmark's move? Is this a sign of Western influence waning in Africa, or just a temporary setback? Are countries like Burkina Faso and Mali better off charting their own course without Western interference? And here's a provocative thought. Could this be the beginning of a larger trend? Will we see more Western countries closing their embassies in African nations that don't toe the line? Or is this just Denmark trying to make a statement? Let's not forget the bigger picture here. Africa is rising, and the old power dynamics are shifting. Countries like China and Russia are offering partnerships that don't come with the same colonial baggage as Western nations. Is this why Denmark and others are feeling threatened? Think about it. Africa's population is booming, its economies are growing, and its voice on the global stage is getting louder. Maybe moves like this are just symptoms of a changing world order, where African nations have more say in their own affairs. So what's next? Will other Western countries follow Denmark's lead? Or will this backfire, pushing more African nations into closer relationships with Eastern powers? One thing's for sure. The diplomatic landscape in Africa is changing, and fast. Gone are the days when Western countries could dictate terms. African nations are asserting themselves, choosing their own allies, and charting their own course. In the end, maybe Denmark's embassy closure is less about Burkina Faso and Mali, and more about the West's fading influence in Africa. It's a stark reminder that the old ways of doing things are no longer working. So, my fellow Pan-Africanists, what do you think? Is this a moment for celebration as Africa asserts its independence, or is it a concerning sign of growing global divisions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, every embassy closure, every diplomatic shift, is another page in the story of Africa's rise. And make no mistake, the world is watching. So let's keep the conversation going, keep holding leaders accountable, and keep pushing for a truly independent Africa. Stay woke, stay informed, and keep fighting for African sovereignty. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more analysis on African politics and international relations. Thanks for watching.